Oh, we're live. What's up, everybody? Must be time for the hot box. Gonna pack this beast right here real quick. Got a great show for you today. Gonna talk to the great Gooey Rabiniski. You may be familiar with his work on High Times. He's been published. Most recently, there were a couple articles on Waxy, news site that I thought was pretty cool, pretty interesting. So it's good to see some people writing some more longer form articles in regards to what's going on with cannabis, and especially one in particular about cannabis, medical marijuana, and alcoholism. And yeah, can appreciate not being an alcoholic, but the fact that these plant medicines have far greater use as far as medicines in helping addiction. So this bowl might be packed too far. Got some, and actually, we'll maybe talk about some of this on the show. Got some weed reviews from a friend, and we're going to got some terpene profiles, got some cannabinoid profiles. So we'll talk about those on the show because I think it's pretty interesting to see. The weed I thought what I liked the best actually was the least THC. So just leave it at that. And yeah. Hotbox number 163.
On the seventh day,
The terrors of tripping on pump.
Be there! Scour the spaceways! Explore fast! Alien world! Tin right here contains the whole rigmarole.
I used to smoke about an ounce of hash every day.
Good.
And it made me go a little bonkers.
Maybe if I occupy his mind with more duties, I can control his space.
Hi, big fat doobies. Hi.
Hi. What's up, everybody? Today is Tuesday, August 25th, 2015. This is episode 163 of the Hot Box. I'm Matt Lee. This is the Hot Box. Check us out. Hotboxpodcast.com. It's the site. You can read all about it. On today's show, got something fun for everybody here. Going to talk to the great Gooey Rabiniski. I wrote a couple articles over on Waxy. One in particular about terpenes, cannabinoids, cannabis research happening on the legal level, up and all these fun things we're discovering. And then a longer form article in regards to using cannabis in addiction as far as being an alcoholic goes. So I find that pretty interesting. And then I want to have him on when we talk about this. Karina Kamen sent us the letter that she actually is going to, or has already read to the Clarkston City Council. So this is going to be good. I really hope they get that sorted over there. So got some new read reviews up on stuffstonerslike.com. Check it out. Chocolate Trunk from Orgro's up, or from Forbidden. Where is this from? There's so many weeds that have been reviewed. I can't keep track of them all. It's all over the place. This is from Orgro. So that's pretty cool. Got the Green Crack, Super Silver Haze, Golden Pineapple, some Star Dog, some Plushberry, Blackberry Pie, Phantom Cherry Pie, Blue Magoo, OG Kush, and then, of course, the Lit E-Nail review, which I'm still super stoked about. So check out all those over on stuffstonerslike.com. You can search for Matt Lee in the search box there, and that'll bring you up to my byline with all of my reviews. So without further ado, we'll get Gooey Rabiniski on the show here, and we'll talk about some weed stuff. Gooey Rabiniski, you are live on the Hotbox podcast, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How's your week going so far?
So far, so good. Mondays are the start of my weekend, so, I love that.
You alternative lifestylers.
I know. It's awesome. Getting paid in cash and getting Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays off. How are you doing, man? Got some good articles up on Waxy I wanted to talk to you about. I appreciate you taking some time out and coming on the show.
You bet. I'm looking forward to talking about some of these topics. I think one of the biggest problems in, well, really, the free world, but let's just limit that to the United States or maybe North America, But the problem is ignorance on the part of voters, on the part of consumers. And consumers are voters; they're just voting with their dollars. So, anyway, we can educate people beyond reefer madness and all this really silly bullshit that we've been dealing with for the last 80 years in terms of education and media. We need to take advantage of social media and do that.
It is much easier now than ever, and I don't think it could have happened any other time except for the time that had this sort of platform that was, worldwide, global, whatever you want to call it, able to get out information by the people, for the people. And I mean, that's kind of how this stuff starts. It's like somebody gets an idea that is different than what the government's been telling them, and they're like, wait a sec, I don't feel dangerous and want to go kill and rape and all that stuff when I get stoned on the weed. Something to this. And then of course, now we have, as your article says, cannabis research happening on the up and up level, which is awesome. Before, you had to have special Schedule 1 grants and all that stuff, and they would only give them to you if you were going to show that weed was dangerous, it seemed like. So now people are working in labs and for labs that have the PLCs and the HPLCs and everything that can test this stuff. And you're talking about over 100 different cannabinoids that have been isolated and identified to date, and that's since the first ones were discovered back in '64.
Right. In Israel, I mean, it's still since 1937, and there wasn't a lot of hardcore laboratory, double-blind human trials kind of research going on prior to 1930 for most drugs, for lots of things that people put in their bodies. So in some respects, at least in the United States, we've never had robust, well-funded research into cannabis as medicine or recreational effects. The health realities of it. We've basically never done that. And it's really ironic because America is, at least in terms of industry and capitalism, certainly a leader in the world. And yet half of these articles I'm writing for Waxy, when I'm citing studies, they're from Spain or Mexico. Maybe, you get some stuff out of McGill University in Canada, United Kingdom, sometimes even Australia. And they're relatively conservative on herb.
I almost wonder if it's almost like the space race and we had like an enemy that we had to beat. Like, I almost wonder if there was like a Middle Eastern or a Russian version of that's like, we're going to map all these cannabinoids first and you're not. And I mean, it is happening in other countries. Like you point out, the latest ones in Israel, talking about the CBDs and CBGs and whatnots. And like, it still seems like they're just trying to be that prohibition voice. And it's like, well, that's fine, but not for us. It's a weird mind state that they've adapted because it is science and it's research. And we're usually like all about that as a country, but yeah, I don't know.
The lack of research and the lack of credible, objective scientific data that would come from that research. And we tend to think the days of reefer madness are far in our past, but, I have teenage kids who just a few years ago went through a DARE program that, told them medical marijuana is as bad as heroin or PCP. And, it's just spewed a bunch of I don't care if you lean left or right, center, if you're fat or skinny, you're dumb or smart. I really don't care. But you need to look at the research and you need to educate yourself. And we've got a lot of people out there, whether they be DARE police officers or teachers in school and parents who they're just regurgitating what's been said for the past 40, 50, 80 years. Because
that's easy, right? It's easier to do that than to actually do the research yourself. And when I say do the research, I mean Google it. You're not in a lab, mixing chemicals. You're just looking online, seeing what you can find. And they would rather, just turn a blind eye to it. And actually, we've kind of been talking with a couple of people in the town of Clarkston, Washington, because everyone assumes that here in Washington, like, oh, it's recreational. Everyone has it that wants it. Everyone that wants to sell it can do. Everything is fine. But there are these counties that people don't realize, and they're generally smaller counties that they're run by this city council, and they I find the more harsh their stance on cannabis is, the more corrupt the city council is. It's a weird thing. But in Clarkston, Washington specifically, they sold the business license and they did everything that they were going to do as a city. And then when the business opened up in the place that they said they could be, they shut it down. And so this stuff is still happening regardless of if they're educated or not. You know, it's a weird thing to stop industry like that.
Well, you bring up a very good point, Matt, because everybody tends to think of Colorado being the first state in the nation to legalize recreational, that they're just this kind of nirvana of both medical and recreational marijuana and marijuana tourism. And they do have these amazing things going on from both the commercial and a scientific, and research perspective in Colorado. But the reality is most of that's in Denver. And the majority of the counties and municipalities, let's just say, municipal bodies, whether they're villages or townships or counties, but the majority of them have said, well, we can't change the law that you can possess and consume here, but we can say no marijuana businesses, even if they're medical, screw it. You got to drive to the next county. Like 68% of the counties in Colorado have done this. And what it really proves at a political level is that Denver passed. This is a Denver thing. It's not so much a Colorado thing.
Right.
Colorado are pissed off about it.
And that's interesting to see, like, and living in other states. Like, I came from Montana to come work in the cannabis industry here in Washington. And like the whole mindset is that, oh, these states have it made now. And it's kind of far from that. I mean, they do more so than like a state like, let's say, Tennessee or Oklahoma, somewhere in the Bible Belt that it's like a giant felony if you have a little keef in your grinder, to the more wide open markets that California and even Montana used to have before their medical got clamped down on. And I mean, you see it here in Washington as far as like medical versus recreational. Like even within the same, what should be the same industry, like you have this infighting that people, for some reason or another, whether it's political agenda or whatever it is, like they can't agree on it. It's a strange thing. And like Ohio, for example, they're about to vote on like a monopoly. Like, are you guys cool with this monopoly happening? Because the rest of the country doesn't seem to like monopolies unless it's, phone service or cell carriers or something silly like that.
I've written about Responsible Ohio several times just because I was very intrigued by it.
What do you think about them? Are you down with the monopoly, or is it?
Okay, if we want to be like Mr. Spock, if you're a Star Trek,
sure, or white or black.
To this, right? So if you just want to be very logical about the situation, it's 1,000 shades of gray. There's tremendous benefits for consumers, and despite some shortcomings like no outdoor growing, etc., it's not a bad deal for medical users either, because currently in the Buckeye State, all of those people just mentioned are criminals,
right,
with, in very many cases, felonies. And think about how it's clogging up the judicial system, wasting police time. I want them to be solving rapes and thefts. And the guy who robbed the ATM yesterday, find that bastard. They shouldn't be messing with a kid who's got a couple joints in his pocket.
And I can see that being like, if you can, and I don't know, I'm really torn with this because I've seen what monopolies can do as far as like internet service providers and cable companies in cities where like that's your only choice and their service is appalling. But I can also see having like a standardized body of people that know what they're doing, hopefully, being like, we're going to produce this for everybody and everyone that wants it'll get it. I don't know. It seems like maybe if you can pick places to do it where it's like environmentally more favorable than others and you're not damming up streams and ruining ecosystems and everything, like there's so much more that goes into it than to just say like, yes, that's good, or no, it's not. But when you hear monopoly, like instantly you're like, well, why does it have to be that way? Like the market should just sort itself out. If you think about it, if there's too many shops or too much weed, like the price will drop. It will eventually sort itself out. I don't see why we have to impose such initial like constraints on it, I guess. I don't know. I feel weird about it. It's a weird thing.
No, you're bringing up some excellent points. And actually I wrote a blog post, 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I called it the schizophrenia of Responsible Ohio, because on the one hand, it's really, you've got guys like Russ Belville, who writes for the Huffington Post and is pretty widely distributed on social media. He's got a lot of readers. He's a smart guy. He's a good writer. And he's saying, go for Responsible Ohio. He's not ignoring the shortcomings of the monopoly. And I'll tell you right now, some of his arguments are just very, very sensical and logical. Now, personally, nobody's asked me this yet, but would I vote for Responsible Ohio? No, I would not. And the reason I'm against it, and I would just really feel for all the people who are going to get busted, in the next year that it takes then in 2016, November, to pass something else. But the monopoly, you need robust competition on the production level in order to drive down prices, increase innovation, increase brand creativity, service specific market niches. You can't have only 10 production facilities. This is not me being politically for or against Responsible Ohio whatsoever. That's just economics 101.
Yeah.
And people can ignore it or not. I do think that there's a lot of people in the Ohio legislature, largely, Republican dominated state legislature, that are just against marijuana, period. And many of them have been vocal about it, including Governor Kasich. So you've got these people who now have introduced an anti-monopoly bill that's going to compete with Responsible Ohio on the November 3rd ballot. And basically, if both of these pass, it will instantly nullify Responsible Ohio. So I think the motive of some of the people in the Ohio legislature, some of these reps and senators, is anti-marijuana, and when it's anti-medical marijuana especially, it's really sad that they haven't educated themselves or listened to their constituents. But the ones who are sincerely against monopolies or oligopolies, if you want to be technically correct, being written into the state constitution, those people, they've got my vote. I'm going to vote no for Responsible Ohio and yes for the anti-monopoly, because that's the way I would do it anyway if I was there.
Sure. And getting back to the marijuana, as far as being an endocannabinoid system and having all of these effects, I like that you pointed out, and I haven't really seen this in much reading, is that a lack of this stuff in your ECS is could be, what's causing some of this. And of course, we'll need a lot more research to happen. But I have always thought that, and I've never actually put it down on paper. And then I read that and I was like, yes, that's how to phrase it. That's awesome.
Yeah, endocannabinoid deficiency is interesting because, in the 70s and 80s, I think American consumers got very acclimated to the idea that you were being convinced by vitamin companies and pharmaceuticals that you were deficient in something, right, and they just happened to have the product that would make you not deficient anymore and bring you up to snuff.
And we've seen that now, that a lot of that was just way overkill. You're getting, the majority of those vitamins and minerals you need in your diet. So that was just
diets, right. So I think we understand the concept of the deficiency, but it's true that, we sit in these bad postures all day long in these cube farms and corporations and the jobs we hold on to. So, we can pay our bill. Not like we can just walk out of that environment and start canoeing every day.
Right. Go farming and everything. Yeah.
I love that perspective from certain tree huggers, but, we do have to have a job. Maybe you get a standing desk, I don't know.
A ball, perhaps. I've seen lots of people sitting on giant red balls lately.
That kind of crazy Google kind of stuff.
Yeah, right.
But we don't necessarily have the healthiest of lifestyles. We've got stress and anxiety and carpal tunnel, and it's crazy. So I think, given our lack of exercise, too much time watching TV, fatty processed foods, I think it really makes sense. I don't think it's a stretch to think that we're deficient in multiple ways.
Yeah, and even just cannabinoids aside, I mean, there's a myriad of other plant medicines that have, like tryptamines, for example. Our brain creates that as well. We have anandamide as one of the cannabinoids that our brain creates, and it's interesting to see the difference in the attitudes and the modes of people that are completely one side and like do not have any of these things in their system, and then the other side that is, you know, well experienced in like mushroom tryptamines and DMT and all of these other plant medicines. It's like a night and day difference in their personality and attitude. And like for me personally, I'd much rather deal with the side that isn't doped up on liquor but is been enlightened through these plant medicines. They're such nicer people. I feel like more enlightened, at least.
Yeah, the kind of people you meet at the, you know, in the Deadhead circles and at the music festivals.
Yeah, barter fairs. Exactly. But always so nice and like caring and willing to help you. It's definitely an interesting difference.
I think you can definitely tell, you know, if you have a coworker or a neighbor or you know, possibly you're at the store or whatever, and you see someone who's you just get this feeling that they've never ever smoked cannabis in their entire life,
right?
And that they need to, you know, that this is just a person who is miserable with life and, you know, stressed out of their mind and probably self-medicating with, you know, booze and tobacco, which is what most Americans do.
Well, that was encouraged. I mean, that was like media created and designed specifically to get at you and at ladies back in the Mad Men days of those that guy that created that first smoking ad. Insane how much, you know, they captured in that whole thing.
I think if not only did we erase stigma and then the reefer madness perceptions that are still held by so many, you know, conservative and religiously fundamental people in the United States, and we replaced it with education and they really understood cannabinoids and terpenes and, you know, the efficacy of cannabis for dozens, probably what'll end up being hundreds of ailments and diseases. You know, if they suddenly had that perception, and then on top of that, you apply some madman level, you know, billion-dollar marketing and ad campaigns.
The Bernaysian parasite is what they call that.
And look, we've got, I really like it when people compare the burgeoning marijuana business, especially recreationally, with the wine business. I remember telling a colleague and saying, yes, please do that. If you have any influence over that, market it to me like a wine, because the whole idea is on quality, right? Now, I'm not saying all the wine out there is great, but they're all trying to give you the impression that they're a distinguished example of the art.
Sure, you can get your $2 bottle of Boone's Farm or Mad Dog 2020, or you can get your top shelf, you know, $800 19, you know. And I've seen dates on weed like that, like in shops, like this is the pre-98 cut of the Bubba Kush, you know, like it is very connoisseur like in as the wine industry is. We have weed tasting parties here, like in as people have wine tasting, except we don't obviously spit the weed out, we smoke it. But it's a lot of the same thing, you know. We pass around, then we have the terpene profiles of that bud that was analyzed from the lab, and it's like, we first see what people smell, and then we smoke it, and then we look at it again with the profiles so as to not have a preconceived notion going into it of what you should be smelling, like to get the actual, like what do you think you're smelling.
So with smoke, how do you clear your palate?
That's one thing we're still working on, and the lab is kind of maybe gonna come out with some sort of terpene mix that would do that, but I'm not sure. I drink a lot of rock stars and eat candy sometimes, but yeah, it's definitely, there's got to be a way to do it, right? I mean, it's like anything else. It's taste buds and the alimentary system. Yeah,
exactly. You know, and it's nice that in legal states, and again, with reference to what we were talking about earlier, that, you know, it's still no panacea. It's still, there are, you know, large sections of these very relatively progressive states like Washington, Oregon, California, Colorado, Alaska, you know, that are just very conservative and don't encourage that. But at least like where you are in Washington, there's enough of a community that's grown up around both recreational and medical marijuana, that you can have those parties that you're talking about, and those people can come together and share growing experience, or people with MS or cancer or AIDS, like some of the stuff you see at WHAM in Santa Cruz, California. That a community of hundreds of those people comes together, and with that community comes, I think, a certain knowledge level, a certain kind of hive level knowledge and understanding of best cultivation practices, best usage practices, and even getting into some low-level scientific research.
Like the LD50 of marijuana, for example. You'd have to have a brick of it dropped on your head to kill you. Although, I suppose you could extract it down into like something super pure maybe, but it's still such a huge amount. Like it's almost designed, or it evolved in a way to like perfectly work with our system. And if there's too much, it's fine. You're just going to take a little nap.
Exactly. Well, and I apologize because I write so much, I sometimes, forget where this came from. But there was one article that discussed, now this was a study with laboratory animals that happened to be rats. And the rats, when injected with very high quantities of THC, began producing kind of an anti-THC chemical. It was a protein or something. But
almost like THCV, sort of?
And it counteracted it, and kept them from just, going out of their minds on the THC. But they only saw that at the very elevated levels. So, maybe back to what you're talking about with the endocannabinoid system, if the endocannabinoid system and cannabis as a plant and other herbs evolved it along with humans, okay? So a change in the plant could mean a slight change in the human's DNA, and vice versa. And if it kept going that direction, it makes sense that because all mammals have an endocannabinoid system. That's why we can do studies on monkeys and rats and get pretty accurate results, and know what we're going to see in human trials. So what if we have a fail-safe system built into our endocannabinoid system? Because, hey, we're used to this plant. Yeah, we've known this plant for hundreds of thousands or millions of years.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Do you subscribe at all to the stoned ape theory? Are you familiar with that?
It's saying that like Neanderthal, one side or the other.
The mushroom, and we ate it, and that's where, or the monkey ate it, and that's where, or not monkey, but you know what I'm saying, that they ate it, and that's where this higher learning and it unlocks something in the brain, and that's where that evolutionary fork took off and eventually became us.
Stanley Kubrick film.
Sorta. It was a McKenna thing, I think, and I'm not sure where he got it from, but yeah, it's sort of like that as far as the monolith and
yeah,
it's interesting.
I certainly think it could be,
something triggers that great leap or what have you. Like for us, maybe now you would call that technology. If you were, you could call it the process or something like that, that triggers this just exponential, leap in evolution.
Right. I certainly think it could have been something. I think, you had to have an opposable thumb, and you had to have a brain smart enough to operate the damn thing and use it creatively. And if you had both of those, suddenly you're walking on the moon. It's 1969.
Building spaceships.
Right. It's really damn cool.
And it's cool that it's not only like triggering, possible things like that, but like you write about in this piece on Waxy about cannabis treatment for alcoholism, that you can use this sort of stuff as like it's almost like it knew, and I don't want to give like a sentience to something that's not, but it's like it did. It came up with us and was like, you guys are going to be raging alcoholics. A bunch of you are going to get hooked on pills, heroin, all this stuff. So this plant and the system that co-evolved with it's like a way to kind of, it doesn't really flush out your system, but it will definitely help you cope with it. And I've had interactions with other medicines like that, like Ibogaine, which does actually fully just wipe your system and kind of lets you see what you need to see to deal with the psychological side while it's doing the work on your physical side and like helping these receptors close back up and everything. And it is very interesting. I feel like cannabis is like that, but on a much, lighter scale.
Well, we tend to think we need to understand more about terpenes and cannabinoids, and that's all true. I mean, we're very ignorant about all this. For as long as humans have been using this plant, both you know, in the form of modern day marijuana and cannabis, and traditionally as hemp, and not necessarily for euphoric purposes. But we're super ignorant of it. But I think one area where we really need to get some good research is with the CB1 and the CB2 receptors. You know, it's only within the last, 20 years, something like that, you know, not even half a lifetime, where we've understood, oh, it's a CB1 receptors dealing with THC and responsible for euphoria, and the CB2 are more for the immune system and more the medical side of it. This is all fairly recent knowledge, and again, because of the dearth of research in the United States, okay, so we know that. We haven't been able to do anything with that knowledge, or we haven't been able to take it to the next level. Stepping
stones, for sure. And that's where things, I've been reading a little bit about THCV and the different affinities it has, and you could almost use that in a way. And I did notice another article you wrote about tolerance and everything. And I wrote a little something about this over on Stuff Stoners Like, about how changing up your strain, and of course you can't always do this depending on where you live, but if you have the access, switching up your strains, which switches up your cannabinoid profile and your terpene profiles, will reinvigorate your high. And of course you can only do this so many times before you really just need to stop smoking for a couple weeks. But it is interesting that you know, depending on which ones you get at which levels, like it kind of dictates the effect, and then you can get used to that, to where you need to, you know, smoke a totally different strain that has a completely different profile to it before you can really get those effects. And I'm kind of to the point where, you know, there aren't really anything else to switch to. Just reviewing so much weed, after a while, you're just like, okay, need to take a break. And I feel like it's interesting that the THCV stuff, like you could almost use that as like a reset, if you could then figure out how to reset the THCV or get it to where its half-life is low enough. You know, there's a lot of stuff there, but it's an interesting path to go down if that was possible.
Yeah, it takes an intense knowledge of not only the cannabinoids themselves, but the endocannabinoid system also, because, you know, it's a lock and key kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like the opiate receptors and mu receptors and stuff.
Exactly. So we can't just have isolated knowledge of the cannabinoids and know very little about the receptors. And really, thank goodness, medical technology, testing technology is advancing at the pace that it is, because I think this becomes a big data game, where whether it's in cultivation, whether it's in understanding the DNA structure of a creature with an endocannabinoid system and how it works with terpenes and such. But it's extremely complicated stuff. You know, I don't think anybody really pretends to understand the big picture, even though there's some really, really smart guys out there doing research. You know, people like you got GW Pharmaceuticals, they're doing some neat stuff, Ethan Russo. So yeah, we still, you know, we have hope on the horizon. It's just a political mess.
Right. And it's still so new. And because of how, I mean, any other industry that has had such a large just mark on it for so long because of government propaganda and everything, like it's neat to see the upward graphs of like the 502 data sites and everything, that even in the face of all of this negativity, like everyone's still into it. We just need to get everyone else into it, or at least backed off from, you know, making it this huge thing where hoops have to be jumped through just a new normal business. And it's like you're hurting businesses and they're still doing well, which is amazing to me. And the whole tax structure of it, as far as not being able to use your materials as write-offs because of old mafia-esque rules. Like there's definitely a lot of stuff that needs to get fixed.
I can't believe there's dispensaries like Denver Relief, for example, in Denver, obviously. They've been there since '09. They're the oldest in Denver. There were some that were founded prior to them, but they're not around anymore, unfortunately. And obviously there's a real thriving population of dispensaries in Denver. But I can't believe they've been in operation since '09, so about 6 years. And It's cash only basis. They can't even take a customer's debit or credit card and swipe it and say, there's your $80, and enjoy your medicine.
The ones here actually have ATMs in there that you can use, but still no taking cards. And it's the whole federal thing. If it wasn't a Schedule 1 and they weren't such giant D's about it, like, you wouldn't have this issue. I mean, you have services popping up like Pay Quick and everything, but I don't know. I still feel a little timid towards using certain services like that.
Yeah, I mean, you got enough trust issues in this business, and then to introduce another layer of complexity and uncertainty to it through the payment system.
Well, especially one that comes out of nowhere and is like, oh, hey, come put your money in our banks that aren't here. It's like, okay, sure.
I barely trust PayPal. I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. If PayPal would be like, I mean, you need a big enough entity. You need like Google and PayPal and Amazon and everyone that has a wallet system to get together and be like, all right, listen, we're done doing business with anyone until you guys are done being dicks to the weed industry, because all of our employees smoke weed. Like, the whole tech industry is all about weed and other plant medicines. They're the ones big enough to be able to do that, or at least just replace the technology with technology of their own that does do that. It's not that far off, but I feel like they're taking so long because the government, like, this is their last chance to really capitalize on it. So they want to do it as slowly as possible to where they make enough profits at the end. It's like a buyout, right? Like the founders of this company, this United States weed prohibition company, they're like, we're going to get our payout. And we want it to be big, because after this, we're done. Our jails are going to be empty. Like, all of these things we've been profiting big bucks on are going to go away.
There's Bernie Sanders trying to, they're speculating he's going to introduce legislation to outlaw prisons for profit. Just totally do away.
That would be huge, right? Like, that is the worst thing. You can't be like, here's a prison and a law system to put people there for no good reason other than for profit.
Everybody likes money. I love money. I don't know. You probably love money. Most people I know like sex, money, and ice cream. They like those things.
Humans, man.
Yeah. So we'll create the system that is fueled by money. Their motive is money. Well, everyone likes money. Okay. So they say, wow, the more people we lock up, the more money we get. I'm not even getting conspiratorial with, the payouts and just all the other stuff that has got to be going on with such a profit-driven.
It's like every TV show about that you've ever seen, and like take bits and pieces from all that, and that's pretty much what's really happening.
Yeah, that's creepy.
It is.
Like, thinking about the prison system in the United States, it's just it's creepy and very, very dark.
Definitely. I do want to read. I had a letter this was actually written by a lady named Karina Kamen. She is in Clarkston, Washington, and has been attending these city council meetings. And we've kind of been following this along a little bit with Nathan Betts and the Canfor Life dispensary that was closed down, and then like in a lawsuit, or not a lawsuit, but in a court case with the city because of it. And it was a whole mess, but it's getting to the point where like the citizens have realized that, all right, this city council, regardless of how much educating and how nice we are and all of the stuff we have brought to them, like, they're not listening. So a couple weeks ago, one of the city council members just totally fell asleep in the city council while they were hearing from the people, the public comment. And so this is a letter that she is going to read to them, or has read to them already. And she wrote it into us and wanted me to share it. She says, to the members of the Clarkston City Council, I'm again writing you to discuss the ban that you have in place against the sale of marijuana in the city limits of Clarkston. I'm kind of hoping that you can shed some light on this whole thing. I'm not really sure what more we as voting citizens can do to get you to step back and take a look at what you are doing. In the last month or so, this community has come together to help others. We have shown that this city is caring, compassionate, hardworking, and giving citizens that join together and rise to the challenge of helping others. First with the passing of our friend Dale Spear, now with the tragic wildfires that are savagely consuming our beautiful forests as well as the forests of our neighboring states, we've joined together every council meeting to stand up against the negative looks, comments, name calling, and the overall feeling of being looked down upon simply because we as people feel differently than each and every one of you. It is not right. You keep using the smokescreen of keeping our children safe when in actuality you're doing them harm. You're dividing the unity that this city possesses. We have proven it. Another point I wish to make is that I've personally heard each and every one of you claim that none of you are opposed to medical marijuana. To this, I have to disagree. You have all proven otherwise. The passing of Senate Bill 5052 bans medical and recreational marijuana together as one and the same. My question to you is, how can you say that you're looking out for the better of our city, turn around in the very same breath, tell us that we and our children have to suffer? All because of a $50 city business license that you refuse to issue? My final matter is to a specific councilman, Mr. Provost. I sat at the last meeting and watched you sleep while the public was speaking. This is not the first time either. I had to dig my phone out of my purse, turn it on, and snap 2 totally different pictures of you. You can give whatever excuse you want, but you are clearly sleeping. My statement is this: if you are so bored or uninterested in what the public has to say, why don't you step down now and save us all the time? Sincerely, Karina Kamen.
He was tired. He was up all night with some Brazilian hookers, and he was really kind of stressed out.
Hey, fast times in Clarkston, Washington, when you're a city council of 5 and you've been probably born into it like some weird Game of Thrones thing.
It's like, you know, I used to live in Virginia outside of DC, and they have, you know, the blue bloods, the traditional families with the money and the power, relatively conservative. And so it sounds like you're talking about the blue bloods of like the Pacific Northwest.
It is kind of. It's like the Hetfields and the McCoys, more like. That's like what it kind of reminds me of. Yeah, they're just like, this is our land. We're going to do this. And they're like, no, you're not. This is our land. And the people voted on it. So it's like, you guys are kind of not doing what the people wanted. And the people are getting mad. And now they're paying attention to you.
Yeah, that's the whole issue when a county or municipality says no to it. Like I said earlier, they can't say no to legal possession and consumption. They can't go counter to the state, but the state gives them the option. Now, when those laws are passed, this makes it a little more difficult to pass them, to get a lot of those yes votes. But they can pass it and say, this cannot be modified. This has to be implemented 100% to this language, you know, for every single citizen in the state. Like, for example, like welfare legislation or something. You can't exclude certain groups if they qualify. So that would be something where, no, you can't mess with this, municipalities. But in this case, the language typically allows them to do so. And I think it creates a very different culture. It's kind of a divisive culture. Well, look at prohibition. I grew up in Ohio, and there would be dry counties. And I remember these dry counties very well when I was a kid. People would be like, no, I live in, you know, Butler County and it's dry. So we gotta drive 4 miles to go get beer. And I thought, what the hell's that about? That sounds
it's weird. You're going to drive over this imaginary line where all of a sudden the county is not dry and get booze and then bring it back to your county, or are you consuming them there and then driving back? Like, how does that work?
Right. It's just freaking ridiculous.
It's that prohibitionist attitude that kind of makes these things that people then do because they want to get messed up one way or another. Like, that's how life is. That's how humans are. And you make it more risky, and then you make it the option of you making even more money because you're going to get a DUI and then have to pay fines and get put into that system that just cashes in on more people being put through it. It's another weird thing.
Yeah. That's, you were talking about Waxy earlier. That's one of the very first articles I ever did for them back in the spring, and it was about the dark side of legalization and how, if you think conservatives, and again, I don't want to go all Republican and Democrat. I have plenty of friends who are Republicans, as long as you plug your brain in and try to think about some of these issues, there are intelligent arguments on both sides of the aisle. And at the same time, they're both crappy parties who are not getting jack done, and they've been bought off by corporations and special interests. Yeah. So I really like to leave that behind. But there's conservative entrenched, powers do not gently give up their foothold. You know, I mean, if I were General Motors in 68 or whatever, if I was on top of the world's largest corporation, I guess what today is Apple Computer, I would damn well not want to give up my leadership position either. So I understand, you know, I think that's part of the capitalist system. But when there's so many dirty tricks and so much propaganda,
Right.
and just the refusal, you know, it's just a couple months ago that there was a bill in Congress to allow the NIH basically under the command of the DEA to do very limited research with a focus on CBD oil, okay, on non-THC cannabis products. And as conservative and as tightly controlled as that was, holy crap, the DEA would have been calling the shots, okay? And it would have been a government agency, NIH, that would have been doing it. They still voted it down. So I think that is the pinnacle, in my opinion. That is the
but they have a history of that. Like during after the Nixon era, when they had their counsel and their doctors, the very own doctors that were advising them on what to do, were like, "Hey, this plant isn't that dangerous. You guys are making a big deal out of it." Like they just chose not to listen. They went and did what they were going to do for their agenda, and we see that time and time again, to where it's just we expect it now. So when it does happen, like you're saying, under these very tight and controlled variables or controls and everything, like they still manage to pull out some sort of positive research that's like, oh yeah, this is actually killing cancer cells when you hose it down there with it, like in a petri dish, under these certain conditions.
Yeah, that's actually, you know, it's interesting that I took note of the fact that National Cancer Institute had some pro-cannabis, relatively pro-cannabinoid for tumor shrinkage and, you know, anti-cancer qualities. They've had that information on their website for several months, a long time. And but just recently, and I think it's great, but it's now suddenly everybody's taking notice on social media and such. And of course, they're packaging it as, look, here's the federal government preventing research and not even allowing cannabis for military veterans, for PTSD, and, you know, all these bad things, all these kind of Luddite-like behaviors. But at the same time, here's a government organization saying, you know, this is, and typically they're citing research that was conducted outside the United States.
Right. And we'll get more and more done within the United States as this opens up more, which it'll be cool to see, and it'll be good to have the validation of the other studies that are like, okay, this is actually a thing. It is kind of not good to see, though, like it getting brought to that other extreme where it's like, this is going to cure cancer, or the people saying that this is like it almost takes it to a creepy homeopathic place. It's like it's not that. I mean, I hope it's not that, but I see a lot of articles kind of parading it around as like the one silver bullet that's going to cure all of humanity from everything that ails it. And I as much as I love it and smoke it every day, all day, like it's not that. I don't feel like.
Right. It's not a panacea. I mean, there are a lot of very serious conditions where it does nothing for the condition itself. It only decreases the symptoms of the disease,
or your awareness of them, and how much you care that this, you know, it makes you more tolerant to things.
Exactly. Well, sometimes all you're doing is dealing with the negative side effects of the pharmaceutical therapies and drugs that you have to take to stay alive. But you know, I've had too many people tell me, I don't know which was worse, my disease or the side effects of my pharmaceutical drugs.
Yeah.
It's a cliche.
Yeah.
Okay? When it's that bad, if all the cannabis does is deal with the side effects of the drugs that try to keep you alive, how can you be cynical about that? But it does so much more. It's like, I mean, it'll put Crohn's into remission. And if the animal studies that have been done are found to be true in human trials, it means it basically puts cancer into remission too, something it doesn't do for a whole lot of other conditions. Right.
A lot of these things that we see, and it would be interesting to test if the people that are at greater cancer risks are also the people that have completely, you know, made their endocannabinoid system deficient, like have never smoked weed ever, that sort of stuff. It would be interesting to see. And again, correlation isn't causation, but it would be cool to see if it was close or something. Because
I
maybe
think
it's
we'll learn a lot of neat stuff. You know, like if we've got genetic defects at birth, where let's say you were missing a finger or a toe, or you know something like that. Then could you not be born with, say, a deficiency in CB1 or CB2 receptors in the endocannabinoid system, or you know throughout the immune system and those organs, and therefore you're less able to absorb things like either internally produced or externally produced phytocannabinoids. But you know, some people are born with a big nose, a small nose, tall, short, you know, different skin colors. What's the spectrum within humans of endocannabinoid system health, so to speak?
well, if you look at it that way, like what do other deficiencies cause? I mean, diabetes, stuff like that, or it's a deficiency, if you want to look at it that way, that has huge effects on you negatively.
Yeah, life altering.
Yeah, exactly. We just don't know yet, but we will one day. So
That's right.
to go back to the Bernie Sanders thing, just to throw this out there, like, are you following him as far as a possibility? I mean, surely more than any other lesser evil we've been given to choose.
I'm
Lawrence Lessig, perhaps. I like kind of a lot of the stuff he was having to say as far as, you know, I'm just gonna fix this and then be like, see you later.
Lessig is the really, you know, intellectual liberal attorney, you know, professor, Ivy League professor, and I love the guy. And yeah, if I had the choice of all these people, Lessig is one that I would take over.
Lessig and Sanders, because so then when he leaves, then maybe Bernie can have a chance to do what he was going to do, and then by that time, there's only going to be like a year left. So hey,
I mean, I don't mean to sound cynical about the whole thing, because I know it's kind of, you know, in vogue to be cynical about
no, be cynical, please. People need to hear this.
I just, you know, Lessig is telling the truth, and the system's too rigged. He'll never make it.
Yeah.
And everybody knows it. And I know there's that philosophy that says, because that's your attitude, he won't make it, but it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you just have faith in him, he'd make it. And it's like, you know, I don't know. Now,
but he won't, so I'm not gonna. So now he isn't.
argue it, you know, it's silly.
Yeah.
But, now Bernie Sanders, who knows? Because the thing I'm noticing about Hillary, and again, not that I'm spending, you know, I'm reading about cannabinoids. I'm not spending.
I'm the same. Yeah, exactly.
But Hillary, she's got like people who love her for a variety of reasons, whether it's that she'd be the first female president, or that she, you know,
We're like, that's Bill's wife. I'll vote for her.
yeah, there you, we're from Arkansas, and we're voting for Hillary, goddammit, and that's just the way it is. But I think she's got a whole lot of people who just didn't like Clinton, don't like her.
Yeah.
And it really makes me question. I think this is going to be a pretty drama-filled election season.
I feel like this is leading us right into Idiocracy. I'm sure others have said that the same, but it's the guy in Idiocracy that's like the corporation embodiment of everything that is evil, and that's almost like Donald Trump and his toupee and everything. I don't even know, man. It's like a TV show. It is blowing my mind, like a weird TV show.
Donald Trump is such a wealthy, well-connected redneck. You know, he really, really is.
He's kind of like the rich Ron White in a way. Now that you say the wealthy, connected redneck, it's like, I don't know if he's going to start telling me like tater jokes or if he's going to fire somebody. Like, it could go either way.
And Ron White is rich. So that just tells you the sorry state of the average.
Ron White should run. Shit.
Our people will support him. They'll come out.
Oh, man. Well, it's going to be interesting to see either way. And I mean, hey, Canada's just right there. I mean, depending on where you live in the country, like for me, it's just right there. Not saying, I mean, I've seen people post this. They're like, oh, if so-and-so wins, I'm moving to Canada. You know what? Those people do win. And those people that say that, they never go to Canada. They just say that. Because that's what social media is. You can just say shit and then like have no follow through on it.
Exactly. And I love to fantasize about living in Barcelona with my 28-year-old girlfriend.
Please, for me. But yeah, totally. It's like, that's never going to fucking happen. Ever.
I'm sure one view of the tax tables, and I'd be like, no, I'm staying in America.
Yeah.
I want my disposable income, damn it.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
so it's a lot of science, and I think it's great what you and people in your community are doing, because as long as everybody's just trying to educate, again, I categorize it as voters and consumers. And consumers, they're voting. They're doing it with dollars, and in some respects, that speaks the loudest.
and that is kind of weird that that's how the system is set up to be, though, because that almost says that then the people without the dollars kind of really don't get a voice. And it's, again, the whole money thing. But
I agree.
Yeah.
You in a perfect society, and I'm not saying we are, you would hope both the government and corporations were sensitive enough to the needs of everyone throughout society, regardless of wealth or influence, to try to take their needs into the equation that turns into, the machine of public policy.
And of course, the dystopic view of that is that the only way it'll happen is Skynet and us leaving the planet, basically. Like, there is no way, because I heard another show, they talked about this, but they basically said that, like, the only reason we have wars and everything is just, it comes down to one thing. It's that humans are unreasonable. Like, there is just our will to be unreasonable causes all of this conflict and shit. And that's the one thing. And that's the one thing, I guess, that prevents all of that other stuff from happening. Like, it will never be this perfect thing because fucking humans are unreasonable. A bunch of assholes.
Yeah, that's true. Well, there's a lot of very intelligent people out there. Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking. They've all, within the last several months, come out and said, look, the threat of artificial intelligence, of AI, is very real. And if we don't, right here from the get-go, at its infancy, put certain safeguards and policies and industry best practices, if you will, if we don't put those into place within a relatively short period of time, because of the exponential growth of this technology, we're going to have some crazy shit going on, and the robots might be telling us what to do. And I always just kind of, jokingly and cynically think, well, maybe we want the robots in charge.
Maybe we need that.
Kind of screwing the pooch, And we might just want the robots might do a better job than us. And it gives us time off for fishing and NASCAR.
That's good. Yeah, that's the one thing I always like about when I read those kinds of stories. They're like, well, then what are all the humans going to do? It's like, well, we're not going to need to work because all of that stuff is being handled. So we are free to pursue our more philosophical and leisurely pursuits at that point. I want to go travel the rest of the world that I haven't seen yet. Like, there's a bunch of stuff.
The trick just becomes having the affluence, the money to be able to do that if you're not, like, actively employed, and then gets into those creepy, socialist bantering and everything. But no, regardless of the economic system or the form of government, I think maybe we should try the robots, because for God's sake, people say, well, what would you do with all that spare time? But 80% of this country, all we do is bitch about our jobs. We hate commute, we hate our boss, we hate our job, but we hate the customers. It's we got a lot of negativity. Maybe that's why we should hope more states legalize. And because I know I'm a lot more positive after, say, I've done a bag on the volcano than when I've had, say, 3 or 4 shots of Jameson.
Really? Really? Huh. Interesting.
Isn't that just amazing that I would be a certain person after?
That's so weird.
and not whiskey or bourbon. Yeah.
And we had a couple episodes ago, we had a cannabis, she does like relationship counseling and advice, but focus on cannabis. And that was one thing she mentioned, is that, and I mentioned that we kind of try this, and it's like, whenever you have an argument, just stop, go smoke your weed in your separate corners, and then come back and resume your talk. And I can imagine trying that with, like, shots of whiskey. It's like, all right, you just come back in like it's the ring and fights start breaking out. But when you can do that and stop mid-argument, and of course, not everyone can do this, and not everyone can do it all the time, but when you can, it is tremendously different. Like, it's so much more positive, and half the time you ever remember what the hell it was you were arguing about.
That's true. You bring up a good point. I like the idea of kind of like a marriage counselor saying, okay, the next time you guys have one of these, knockdown, drag out fights, you go to the basement, you go to the upstairs bedroom, you know, each smoke a joint, you get back together. And I just pictured, you know, they get back together at the appointed time in the appointed room, and like he walks in naked and she walks in with cookies.
Right? Yeah, totally.
Oh, you guys did chill out. I think you went.
Is this what I went in there for? I'm pretty sure this is what I went in there for. I don't know. Fuck it. Here's cookies.
I heard you say take your underwear off. I swear you said that.
I'm pretty sure. Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah.
It is amazing what this plant will end up doing for society as a whole. I can't wait to see.
Thanks for having me on the show. I've loved it, and I'm not sure what your time limit is. Since
I was actually just gonna say we're about an hour, so you seem like you've done this before, Gooey. Podcasting mogul, perhaps. You can find all of this guy's great writing. You're on Waxy. I saw in your byline you had some stuff on High Times. Like, where else can people find you?
Well, I've got my personal blog at GooeyRabiniski.com, and it's mostly Waxy and my personal blog. You know, this is a burgeoning industry, and it's really exciting right now, and it's the green rush. So there's lots of opportunities out there. So I might start writing for another outlet in the future. We'll see. But I think what's important, we talk about community, and that I feel like you build up an informal, like you have a community of listeners, and I feel like the community
I hope so.
So I gotta admit, I just feel a certain loyalty to them, and so it would be very difficult to pull me away from writing for them. That's probably the best place to see my stuff.
So is Waxy your site, or you just write for them?
No, I just write for them. They're a company in Denver. They're a startup. The guy behind them is from kind of a Silicon Valley mentality, and he knows investors. He knows the right people to try to position Waxy to where it can best get the message out, but also survive financially, because it's not a nonprofit, you know. But it's nice to see a lot of these young CEOs and presidents company founders of startups. They might have 7 employees, they might have 70 employees, but they're not big corporations. And to see them leverage technology, social media, and really just branding on a fraction of the dollar that the big guys do.
Yeah, it's cool. I kind of came over from a tech writing background. I mean, I've always smoked weed and everything, but I never really thought of it as something like I could write about or review weed or strain, you know, stuff like that. So once I found Stuff Stoners Like and started writing for them, and then kind of took like my tech reviews and was like, dude, we could review weed this way. Like, this is awesome. And it kind of went on from there. But yeah, I do run into a lot of the same people that I would see at CES and these other conferences I would cover for the tech site. They're starting weed startups. It's kind of cool because this is my shit. Like, weed is my shit. So I have a lot of helpful stuff to bring to them that they don't know. And it's really cool to see all of these sites popping up.
Yeah, I was watching a news segment or a documentary the other day, but it was saying how the green rush is really very interesting, and that it's where technology and tree huggers overlap. You know, it's part deadheads and it's part software developers.
Yeah, it's the people. It's like the Earth book. I forget what it's called, but it started out as like this book people would subscribe to, and these hippies and these communes that were doing everything themselves. Like, it was a book that had tips on like growing your own stuff, kind of like an end of the world guide if you needed to reset a civilization. It's kind of that mentality of like, we have technology and we can use it, but then we're also like old hippies that like to get dirty in dirt and soil and garden and shit.
Is that a lot of Wicca?
The Rare Earth catalog, is that what it is? God, that's gonna bug me now.
In the Whole Earth catalog.
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
During the Keep On Truckin' era.
Yes.
CB radio was really,
Awesome.
No Twitter handles back then. It was all CB radio. Wow.
That is so cool. That was the one I was thinking of.
Back, I was a little kid, and it was creepy.
Were you playing on CBs and stuff?
No, my dad had one.
Oh, nice.
Because he traveled a lot for his job, and but it's just all the static and the stepping over each other and all.
Yeah,
It's like, no wonder I liked email so much when it came out in the early 90s, because it was like, yes, this is, I make an exact message, I send it, the receiving party gets it verbatim down to the bit. And I know there's a certain accuracy there, and I found it a lot more pleasing than the analog world of CB radio.
Yeah. And that's what gets me in the age of all of this community. Like you can look at your message before you send it. You can make sure it's all like the way it should be. And yet we still have communication issues, and people, I don't know. It's just a human thing, I guess. But all right. Well, Gooey, it's been awesome talking to you. Hopefully we can get you back on the show. And definitely we'll keep following stuff over on Waxy. I'll put links to all this stuff in the show notes at hotboxpodcast.com.
Appreciate the support, and good luck to you and all your friends out there in Washington. You know, you guys are leading the way.
Hopefully. I appreciate that, man. Have a great night, Gooey. Gooey Rabiniski. Check out his work over on waxy.com, WHAXY.com. So, like I said earlier, a great long form article on as far as medical marijuana and alcoholism. And then the article we were talking about cannabinoids and all of that goody stuff. So definitely check out the reviews over on stuffstonerslike.com. Got the chocolate chunk, the green crack, the super silver haze, golden pineapple, star dog. You guys see some of these pictures. I think I finally got my light box and macro lens, everything dialed in. And actually here, for you're watching live, check this out. We'll do a little screen share, show you. Yeah, here we go. So this is some super silver haze. See that there. I know if you're audio listening, this is awful, but check out the live show. You can see it. And of course, there'll be links to stuff in the show notes at hotboxpodcast.com. So check that out. Other than that, we're on Stitcher. We're on iTunes. Leave a review if you enjoy the show. If not, email info@hotboxpodcast.com. Let me know, hey, what can you do to improve the show? And yeah, follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/hotboxpodcast, and on Google Plus for as long as that's around for. Of course, subscribe to the YouTube show, and you'll know when this shit goes live and you can watch. So, Matt Lee, hotboxpodcast.com. Thanks for listening.